So semi-skilled labor, you need total 2000 hours, out of which already you have currently 1500 available. So you won't pay anything for that 1500 hours. Only the remaining extra 500 hours, what you will do, you will pay it at 1.5 times. So the relevant cost will be 500 into $15 into 1.5. That is 11,250. And then unskilled labor, currently fully employed by Mr. Smith on jobs where they produce $2 per unskilled labor, and their current rate is $10 per hour, although extra could be hired at $20 an hour if necessary. Okay, see, they're telling you that unskilled labor 500 hours you need. Already existing unskilled labor are working on other projects. Okay, and you are paying them how much? Unskilled, you are paying them $10 per hour. Either you can hire externally at $20, or you can use your existing unskilled labor and you will have a lost contribution of $2 and you will pay them 10. So 10 plus 2, $12 can be the relevant cost, or $20. Obviously we'll go with $12, so that will be the relevant cost. 12 into 500 or something. Fixed overheads should not be considered to be an accurate estimate of the hourly based on his existing production. Okay, so this fixed overhead should not be considered because these are not incremental cash flows, these are existing only. So by doing this, we'll get the relevant cost. Let me show you, test your understanding 6. Test your understanding 6. Oh, come on. See here, before the previous one which we discussed, sales volume is taken, sales value is taken, cost of sales, direct material is taken, direct labor, only the variable cost part is taken, production overhead, half of it is considered to be variable, so that is taken, expenses, half of it is considered to be 60% of it is considered to be variable, so that is taken. So we get the contribution. Other costs are considered to be fixed costs, so these are directly deducted only from the total. So your department 3 is actually in profits before considering the fixed cost and apportioned cost. So it has to be considered to not to shut it down. Okay, and then test your understanding 6. If we see material A 11,700, where are you? Peekaboo, 11,700 here. Material B 15,000, peekaboo, 15,000. Material C 8,000, 8,000 relevant cost. Material D, relevant benefit of 2,500, relevant benefit of 2,500. Okay, and semi-skilled labor 1,000 hours at $25. I'm not sure. I remember discussing that. I don't recall that. And semi-skilled labor at 22.5. Sir, what is this 22.5? But $10 is existing payment and 0.5. What? That's a semi-skilled. Okay. Unskilled is $12 opportunity cost. Semi-skilled, I'm not sure. I don't recall. I discussed that, but I don't recall. 1,500 spare hours are already been paid. So remaining 500. Acha, into time and half. That's 22.5. Okay, cool. I don't recall that calculation only, but yes, 11,250. Oh, it's on my calculator. 11,250. 11,250 is there on my calci. So that's fine. Okay, so that's as simple as that. Very easy. You don't, once you understand the concept and logic, there's nothing you need to by heart or remember as such. Pure common sense. This subject is pure common sense. Love it for a reason. Okay, so these are all other costs and other examples on relevant cost and other problems on relevant cost which you have to do it yourself. Okay, next one is whether we have to produce further processing decisions. Means basically, you know what happens in a product in a company is basically you have co-products and byproducts, and then you have further processing discussion. Let me do it very quickly for you. Okay, see, co-products, first of all there are something called as joint products. Joint products. So again, within joint products you have two types. One is called as co-product and the other one is called as byproduct. Now what are these, sir? See, if you are talking about high importance or high value or high quantity, something like that, that's called as co-products. And if you are talking about low value items, we call them as byproducts. So what are you talking, sir? See, basically in a production process, sometimes what happens is multiple units are produced. Okay, see, if I'm talking about petroleum, a crude oil refinery, you get petroleum, you get diesel, you get kerosene, you get black tar, you get wax, candle wax. There are lots of components which the crude oil is split into. Now all of these are joint products. Within this, petroleum, diesel, the major items, the high value items are considered co-products. The remaining black tar or candle wax, these are considered to be your byproducts, as simple as that. Now, in an organization, what actually happens is sometimes we need to take a decision. We get a point called a split off point. So what is this split off point, sir? A point where multiple products are produced. Let's say at the split off point, you got 3 products, A, B, and C. Now, the companies have to take a decision whether to sell this ABC at the split off point or whether they should do further processing and then sell that. Okay, that is split off decisions. Should I sell it at the split off point or should I further process it and then sell it? So that decision is what we are going to discuss now. Sir, use your common sense. How do I determine that, sir? Additional revenue minus additional cost. Additional revenue minus additional costs. See, at split off point, I can sell for $100. After further processing, I can sell it for 120. But further processing costs are $15. So should I further process or not? Yes. Why, sir? Because you will get an additional benefit of 20 at an additional cost of 15. You'll still have a profit of $5. So that is profitable for you. So go ahead and produce it further, refine it further, process it further. As simple as that, ma. Look at this. Joint products arise when manufacturing of one product inevitably results in manufacturing of other products. Specific point at which these individual products become identifiable are called as the split off point. Cost incurred before the split off point are joint cost for all the products together. After separation, you may by either selling them immediately or can process it further. Okay. So the basis of apportionment of joint cost to products, existing joint cost, the total cost before split off point. So that can be split between all the units either on the basis of their sales value, units into sale price, or else based on the number of units, or else based on net realizable value. Any of these 3 we can use for apportionment. Sir, please understand this is a management accounting subject related topic. This is already covered in F2, but anyways, we'll just see an example and we'll move further. See, illustration 1, valuation of joint products. A and B are 2 products which can be which are joint products. 100 units of 100 kgs are produced, 200 kgs of B. 80 kgs are sold, 150 kgs are sold. Selling price is $5 and $2. Total joint cost is $750. Sir, how do I allocate this $750 to A and B? First case is by using the production units, 100 and 200. 1:2 ratio, split this $750. 500 and 250, 250 and 500 basically. 250 kgs for product, $250 for product A, $500 for product B, or else 750 divided by total 300 units, that is 2.5 per kg for A and B. Okay, next one. So results then based on the production units. Okay, we did this already. What is this? Achha, then the second one is based on the sales value of the production. Sales value of the production. How do I get the sales value of the production? $80 into $5, $150 into $2. See, 80 into 5, 150 into 2. That is 400 and what is this? 400 and minus 200. Achha, cost of sales. This is okay. $400 and 150 into 2, $300, total $700. And the cost of sales, where did they give you the cost of sales? Achha, this 2.5 which we just calculated, material cost. They're calculating the outcome of that. Okay, cool. Then apportioning by the market value at the point of separation. So market value at the point of separation would be 100 into 5 and 200 into $2 based on market value. 100 into 5, 200 into 2. So 500 and 400. So 5:4 ratio, you will split that $750. 417 and 377. Then the trading results are calculated. Basically sales minus material cost, get the profit. That's all. Then based on the net realizable value. Sir, net realizable value is what? You need further information for that. Net realizable value means after the complete, what do you call it? Expenses are deducted. See, this approach should be used in situations where the sales value at the split off point is not known, either because the product is not saleable or if examiner does not tell us. Basically, when information is not available at the split off point, what is the sale value, then we'll do further calculations. Look at this. Further processing costs are given. Selling price after the further reprocessing is given. Product A will require further processing of $280 fixed and $2 per kg. So product A, how many kgs we are able to produce? 100 kgs. So the further processing cost would be 280 plus 100 into 2, 160 plus 150 into 140 basically. And once you reprocess it, you can sell it for 8.4 or 4.5. Now look at this. Final sales value will be 100 into 8.4 and then 200 into 4.5. This one. 100 and 200, 8.4 and 4.5. Achha, not 150, 200. Okay, cool. So 840 and 900 is the sales value. And the further processing cost, 280 plus 100 into 2, 160 plus 200 into 1.4. That is for the processing cost. So net realizable value is 360 and 460. So based on 360 is to 460, we will allocate the total cost of 750 fixed cost. Sorry, not fixed cost. Joint cost. Basic mathematics, basic mathematics, nothing more than that. Just allocation using the weights. Now further processing decision, look at this. Look at this question, the last topic in this particular chapter. A firm makes 3 joint products, X, Y, and Z, at a joint cost of 400,000. Joint costs are apportioned on the basis of weight. Oh, nice. They're talking about the weight of the units produced. Okay, products X and Z are currently processed further. Now you have 3 products X, Y, Z. Weight at the split off is 600 tons, 200 tons, 200 tons. Furthering processing cost, variable cost is $800,000 for X and $400,000 for Z. Sales values are given. An opportunity has arisen to sell all the 3 products at the split off point for the following prices. Okay. X can be sold at 200,000, Y can be sold at 160,000, Z can be sold at 160,000. Which of the 3 products, if any, should the firm process further? Okay. Sir, first let's see about X. Currently you are selling X at what rate? 980,000. But after further processing, you are selling at 980. After further processing, you are selling at 980. Further processing, you are incurring 800 and you are selling at 980. So what is the sales price without further processing? Technically speaking, 980 is what you are selling for. Your additional cost is 800. So 980 minus 800 is 180. Okay, that is the net benefit that you are getting. But if you see here, you can sell it for 200 directly. 180 or 200, which is better, sir? 200 is better. So I will not further process X. I will go for selling at the split off point. Look at Y. Currently you are selling at 120 without further processing. And they are telling you have an opportunity to sell at 160. So benefit, obviously we'll sell it at 160 only. And coming to Z, currently you are selling for 600 after further processing. Costs are 400. So 200 is what you are getting. You get an opportunity to sell for 160. Sir, why would I do that? I would rather go for further production and get 200 benefit rather than 160 benefit. Correct? So X and Y I will sell off at the split off point. Z I will do further processing. See, X. Additional revenue for further processing is 780. Additional cost is 800. So don't, what exactly are they trying to tell it here? Acha, I did the 200 and 180. They did 780 and 800. Common sense, same thing. You don't need to worry about it. Basically, Z you have to further process, X and Y you don't have to. You have to select split off points. That's what I told. Sir, however you are analyzing, it's the same thing. No? You'll get the same answers also. Just a different technique is used. Yeah, 600 minus 400 is 200. 200 versus 160 is 40. 40 additional benefit is there. Coming to X, 980 minus 800 is 180. You can get 200 if you sell off at the split off point. So $20,000 extra benefit you'll get. So sell off at the split off point. That's what. $20 and 40,000. Okay, that brings us to the end of relevant costing. Any doubts in relevant costing, ma? This is a very tricky subject, so let me know if you have any doubts. Relevant costing is one of the trickiest parts in your syllabus, ma. too much common sense to be used. That's the biggest problem. And unfortunately, students are good with remembering stuff rather than using common sense. Please confirm if everybody are able to understand or any doubts in relevant costing. Guys, confirm. Confirm in the chat section. Ma. Can we proceed further or any doubts? Is it all clear? Test your understanding 6 material D. How is it a benefit? Okay, they are telling you you have some radioactive material in your godown. And if you don't use it, it's gonna expire and you have to dispose of by incurring additional $50 per unit of cost. Sir, you have some dangerous material. Either you have to use it, or if you don't use it, you will have to dispose it off safely by incurring extra cost. So if you don't use in this project, you have to incur that extra cost, but you are using it in this project. So you are saving that extra cost of $50 per unit. So that's a saving for you. Understood or any doubt still? Confirm, is it clear or still further doubts? But there are 100 liters and 50 or we are using, and that about other 50. Other 50 we don't care, ma. We are only talking about the relevant cost of this project. Relevant cost of this project is being asked. Whatever other surplus materials or whatever you are having, I don't care about that. Why should I care about that? इस प्रोजेक्ट के लिए जो यूजफुल है उसके बारे में बात करना, बाकी जो है वो तुम्हारा अदर बिजनेस एक्टिविटीज है, दैट्स नॉट रिलेवेंट फॉर दिस प्रोजेक्ट. Okay, cool, good. Chalo, so with that we'll wind up relevant costing. So very quickly, if we go to your index now and take a copy of all this, and go to your intro, and if I paste it here and expand it, so chapter 1 is completed, chapter 2 is completed, chapter 3, chapter 4 is done, 5 is done, 6 completed, 7 we completed pricing, 8 we just finished, 9 is yet to be done, 9 will finish today, 10 and 10 is yet to be done, 11 is completed, 12 is very tricky topic, and 13, 14 and 15 are okay ma. 14 is going to take a little time because of its volume, because we also consider transfer pricing in 14. So transfer pricing is going to take a little bit of time, but 15th chapter is very easy. How to evaluate the performance of an non-profit organization. That's very easy topic. Okay, so we have completed chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 11. 9 we are going to finish now, so we'll be left with 10, 12, 13, 14, 15. 5 chapters we'll be left with, and 29th is my scheduled last date. So 27, 28, 29, 3 days we'll have to complete 5 chapters. Variance analysis is going to take one complete full day, and transfer pricing won't take a complete full day. I think I can do budgeting and transfer pricing, I mean divisional performance on one day, advanced variances one day, and performance measurement and control with chapter 15 on another day. Okay, we'll be done. We'll easily, aram se we'll finish off the syllabus, no problem. Okay, chalo, let's do risk and uncertainty now. We'll have to finish that today at any cost. Then only we'll be on track. Okay, so chapter 9, risk and uncertainty. Sir, we are going to do certain analysis in this risk and uncertainty chapter. First, we are going to understand what is risk and what is uncertainty. Then under risky situations, how do we calculate the probable value or estimated value? Then we'll do simulation analysis, sensitivity analysis, just a little bit of sensitivity analysis, not the complete analysis. Sensitivity analysis is covered in F9. Financial management, you have an entire chapter on sensitivity analysis there. So here only a little bit of understanding will be there. Then how to use expected values in the decision making. Then these are the techniques that are going to be a little bit tricky unless you understand it. The concept, if you understand, it's very easy. But if you don't understand the concept, I have seen students doing stupid techniques like highest of the columns versus lowest of the rows. What dumb nonsense it is, I don't understand. In the exam hall, what will happen, you'll prepare the table, you'll draw the columns and rows, and then you'll be like, which one should I take in columns and which one should I take in rows? Gone. What happens if you do it reverse? So understand the logic rather than the format or the tables or something like that. So let's do that with logical explanation. Okay, and then interpreting a decision tree, how to solve it and all that stuff, calculating the value of perfect and imperfect informations. Okay, chalo, let's move further, sir. See here, risk and uncertainty. So what are we going to talk about risk and uncertainty, sir? First of all, what is uncertainty? See, if I am willing to do something for which the outcome is unpredictable, I'm trying to, how do I say that? Okay, I'm coining. I mean, I'm tossing a coin, so I'm uncertain whether it will be a heads or whether it will be a tails. Correct. So what happens in case of uncertainty is businesses have lots of uncertainties involved. If they are, suppose they are talking about starting a new project, will it be profitable or will it be loss? Uncertain, we are not sure. If everybody are sure, then there will not be any businesses that run into losses, right? Every business has to make profit. If it is a loss making business, nobody will do that. If it is very certain at the beginning itself that we will get losses only, we will not do it in the first place, right? So there is a lot of uncertainty involved. So how do we deal with that uncertainty, sir? So what we'll do is we will try to evaluate the different possible outcomes and the probability of that outcome happening. Okay, so if I'm suppose talking about this tossing a coin example, I don't know, I'm uncertain whether it will be a heads or tails, but I know that it can be either a heads or it can be a tails, and I know the probability is 50-50, right? So that is called risk. Risk is quantified uncertainty. Quantified uncertainty means which has been given a number and which has been allocated a probability. Okay, that is the difference between uncertainty and risk. Businesses cannot deal with uncertainty. Businesses can deal with risk, because once you know the probable outcomes, you can accordingly plan for that. That is what we are going to do in this particular chapter. Okay, so let's see. All businesses face risk. Risk is the variability of possible returns. Variability of possible returns. Whatever are the outcomes possible and what are the probabilities of those outcomes happening. Risk management is very important in a business. It is the process of understanding and managing the risks that an organization is inevitably subject to. So what is the difference between risk and uncertainty, sir? Risk is where number of possible outcomes are known and probability of each outcome is known, basically quantified. uncertainty, number of possible outcomes, but the probability is not known. You don't know whether what will be the result of that. If the probability is known, it's called risk. If it is unknown, then it's called uncertainty. So what will we do, sir? Basically, any business, it needs as much information as possible before it can take a decision, right? We need informed decisions. So how do we get this information relating to uncertain activities? By doing market research. Okay, see, suppose if I'm drilling an oil, I'm drilling in a place for oil. How do I know whether it will be a positive result or whether it will be a negative result? Whether I'll find oil or whether I'll not find an oil? By doing research, na? So first understand in that particular locality, are there any oil mines that are found, or are there any oil wells, not mines, sorry. Are there any oil wells that have been previously discovered? What was the previous success rate? How many wells have been dug and how many of them oil is found? So you do a market research before you take up a decision whether it is the probability analysis relating to that particular project. See, what are the different market research techniques available? You create focus groups. Sir, what are these focus groups, sir? So you go to a particular place and you find out from a certain set of people regarding that particular project. Okay, but please understand, these are small groups. You don't talk to hundreds and thousands of people. Suppose if I'm talking about this oil well wala example, I don't go and talk to the general public about it. I'll only go and talk to experts in that particular area, or news gatherers in that particular area, or else researchers in that particular. I'll basically talk to certain focused group of people. Those are called as focus groups. See, focus groups are common market research tool involving small groups, 8 to 10 people, selected from the entire population. The group is interviewed through facilitator-led discussions. Like basically, I'll ask them questions and they'll answer me. And it's usually an informal environment. Will not basically, you know, when we do research, we cannot be very formal with them. We have to establish a small conversation, strike a chord or two, have a cup of tea or coffee or whatever it is, and then we'll have to basically talk to them like friends to get as much as information as possible. It's not like I'll be an interviewer, I'll ask you questions, nobody will answer them. Supermarket may use a focus group before a product launch in order to gather opinions on a new range of pizzas. So what are the problems associated with these focus groups? Results are very qualitative. See, when you take 10 or 8 people, they may or may not represent the rest of the population. This 10 people think it is good, but the remaining 90 people think it is bad. Possible. That is a risk that is always there. And this 10 people may not give you the same answer. Some of them may say yes, some of them may say no. Some of them say it is very good, some of them say that it is very bad. So the results are very subjective and qualitative. Sample size is small, that may not be a representation of the entire community. Individuals may feel under pressure to agree with the other members or give a right answer. So 10 people are sitting, 8 of them are saying yes, yes, yes. The remaining 2 will be like, if we say no, everybody will question us, so we will also say yes. That thing will happen. Cost and logistic complexity is frequently cited as a barrier, especially for small companies. Online focus groups are becoming more and more popular to address this particular issue. So to talk to this 10 people, a person has to fly from wherever he is to that particular place, gather, again stay in a hotel, food cost, all that expenses will be incurred. Now online is becoming much easier. Then desk research. Desk research is something that you already know, sir. By going through internet, gathering articles, looking into the databases, public data, etc., etc. That is called as desk research. Collected from secondary sources which are published and otherwise available, articles, accounts which are published on the company's financial statements on their websites, census related information, all that stuff. But please understand, there are lots of nonsense that are involved in this. Okay, what is that, sir? You may not get up-to-date information on the internet. Some outdated information may be there. And second thing, the accuracy of the information is not clear. The authenticity of the information. Internet spreads rumors like crazy. Isn't it? Like so much of gossip, so much of rumors, so much of unauthenticated data will be available on the internet. So that's the biggest problem. You need to consider which of them are actually appropriate and which are not appropriate. Okay, they're giving you some different types of examples. I'm not going to worry about that now. Then there is another research, that is field research, going into the field and getting the research. Two types of research are there. One is motivational research and the other one is measurement research. Sir, what do you mean by motivational and measurement research? Under motivational research, what we do is we understand what motivates the person to take a decision. Sir, you go to a supermarket, stand there and look at a person while he is taking a decision, while he is choosing product A or product B, whether he is purchasing Colgate or whether he is purchasing whatever it is, Meshwork. Suppose if I'm talking about toothpaste. So whether he is buying a Colgate toothpaste or whether he is purchasing a Meshwork toothpaste. So you just stand there and look at his decision making. How is he deciding that? Is he checking the prices of the products and then deciding which is more economical? Or is he looking at the offers? Or is he interested into understanding whether it's a made in India product or a imported product? What exactly is motivating him to take a decision? You understand that? That is called motivational research. Then measurement research is basically where you figure out how many units are being sold per day, all that stuff. Okay, see, measurement research, motivational research, the objective is to understand the factors that influence why a customer or a consumer buy or do not buy that particular product. And then coming to measurement, we talk about the quantity, trying to quantify the issues. Okay, depth interviewing, understand in depth by a trained person to gather the quantities and all that stuff. Group interviewing can be done. Word association testing. So this is very interesting. You guys must be playing this. You guys must have played this kind of games and all. So I'll tell you a word. What is the first word that comes to your mind when I talk about this? See, if somebody asks me holiday, I'll say travel. Or if they say something like mobile, I'll say Samsung. So what is the first word that comes to your mind? So based on that, you can understand your brand value. Okay, that's another type of market research. Then you have triad testing. Triad testing means I'll give you three items of each element and you need to pick one. Suppose if I'm talking about soaps, I'll give you 3 different brands of soaps and I'll ask you to pick one immediately without giving it too much thought. Immediately pick one. So we can understand their nature and we can understand what motivates them towards the decision. So all these things. Then measurement research, you can do random sampling, randomly select some people out of thousands of people. Quota sampling. Sir, what is this quota sampling, sir? I went to a supermarket and I want to interview, say, 100 people. So what I'm trying to do is, I'll not just randomly select 100 people. I'll categorize them. People who are purchasing less than 20 items, 20 to 30 items, 30 to 50 items, more than 50 items. So basically someone who just came because they wanted to buy a product or two. Somebody who are planning a grocery shopping for the entire month. I want to do categorized research. So I'm saying that, okay, from each category, I'll pick 20 people. That's called quota sampling. Okay. Or else males versus female, anything, whatever you want to call it. Then we can have paneling. Paneling is basically where we take some samples and subject them to the investigations. Surveying by post, I'll give you a letter or I'll send an email and I'll ask you to reply to that. And else observation, supermarket cameras or all that stuff. Different techniques of research. Common nonsense only, nothing is there in this. Okay, now look at this one. You have different techniques to deal with risk and uncertainty. Sensitivity analysis, simulation, expected value, maximax, maximin and minimax regret, and decision trees. So sensitivity analysis, as I told you, will be tested much in F9 financial management. Simulation is basically test run. You know, you wanted to purchase something. You wanted to purchase a bike or a car. What you will do, you'll first do a test drive. That is called simulation. Simulation is basically dry run. We call it as dry run, or without actually doing that business, we'll do a analysis of what happens if we do the business. What are the possible scenarios? We'll just run a simulation analysis. Expected values is multiplied by multiplication by probability. Then this regret theories, I mean maximax, minimax and maximin theories. Then you have decision trees. These 3 are going to take some numerical calculations. So we still have 5 minutes in this part, so we'll do this 2 parts now. Okay, we'll do the first 2 theoretical topics, I guess, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, sensitivity analysis and simulation, they're just theoretical part. They do not give you any questions. Yes. Okay, chalo. Sir, what is sensitivity analysis all about? Sensitivity, the name itself is very self-explanatory. How sensitive is the project? How sensitive is the decision to that one particular element that we are choosing? Okay, sir, can you explain in detail? Okay, I want to know, like, if, listen to me very carefully, if sales price increase by $2, what will happen to my profit, or what will happen to my project? If labor costs are increased by 10%, what will happen? If material cost is discounted by 5%, what will happen? What if something happens? That is called sensitivity analysis. How sensitive is the project towards the selected element? See, sensitivity analysis takes each uncertain factor in turn, one by one, one at a time, and calculates the change that would be necessary before the original decision is reversed. So right now, we want to go with the project. If the labor cost increase by 10%, this project becomes loss making for us. So the sensitivity is 10% in this particular case. If labor increases by 10%, the project becomes unviable for us. It starts with what if questions. Okay. So what we'll do is, see here, best estimates for the variables are made and the decision is arrived at. First, we will understand current situation, whether we should proceed with the project or not take up the project, or do the activity or don't do the activity, buy it or don't buy it. We take a decision based on the available variables. Then we'll understand how much change is required in each variable before the decision gets reversed. Okay. The lowest percentage of change is required, the more sensitive the project is towards that. So what? If one variable is changing by 10% and your decision is changing, let's say if the labor cost is increased by 10%, then our decision will change. Or if sales price increased by 2%, decreased by 2%, our decision will change. What is more sensitive, sir? Labor needs 10% change. Sales price need only 2% change to change your decision. So the project is more sensitive towards the sales price. Sales price is the biggest influencing factor in this particular case. So you need to understand, lowest percentage of change required means highest sensitivity towards that particular factor. Is it clear? Everybody confirm? Okay. Manager is considering a make versus buy decision of the following estimates. If made in house, what is the cost? And if bought in from outside and then we do a change in the packing and other stuff, what will be the cost? If you are doing in house, the cost is $10. If you are buying it from outside, it's going to cost you $2 variable. External purchase cost is $6, that is 8. Then you can sell it for $14 if you buy it from outside. You are required to assess the sensitivity of the decision to the external purchase price. Okay, look at this, sir. External purchase price is how much? $6. Okay. So right now we are getting a profit of $5 on our existing in-house projection. See, contribution is $5. If we are purchasing from outside, contribution is 14 minus 8, $6. Okay, that means if the price, what did they ask you? Sensitivity to external purchase price. Okay, this $6. Okay, if this increases by $1, if this increases by $1, done. The project becomes useless for me. There is no difference between buying from outside or in-house, because in-house is giving me $5 now. If I'm buying from outside, I'm getting $6. So if it decreases, if the price increases by $1, it becomes irrelevant decision for me. So 1 divided by 6. Sir, what is divided by 6? This existing purchase price is $6 now. So if it increased by $1, how much percentage would that be? 16.66 percentage. So 17%. If the external price increased by 17%, the original decision will become reverse. Okay, so that's what they're trying to tell you. But what are the problems and strengths of sensitivity analysis? It's very easy to calculate. It's very easy to understand, just 1% for one factor. So you just understand which is more sensitive and which is less sensitive, and what is more crucial and what is less crucial, we can understand. But the problem is that sensitivity analysis works only for one variable at a time. You cannot talk about multiple variables at the same time. I cannot say that what if labor increases by 10 and sales price decrease by 2 at the same time. I cannot do that. I can only consider one variable changing at a